These are 5 chilling abandoned building horror stories. It started with a dare, as these things often do. A group of us, young and restless, looking for a thrill. Cranbrook Mental Asylum. They called it cursed, haunted, a place where even the bravest souls wouldn't dare to tread. The air grew cold as we approached the rusted gates, the full moon casting long, eerie shadows across the overgrown grounds. We snuck past the crumbling walls, the silence broken only by our nervous laughter and the pounding of our hearts. The asylum loomed before us, a decaying giant of brick and broken glass, its windows like vacant eyes staring into our souls. This was it. This was where the dare would either solidify our foolish bravery or leave us forever marked by fear. The air inside was thick with the smell of decay and the weight of forgotten memories. Dust motes danced in the pale moonlight filtering through grimy windows, illuminating rusted medical equipment and decaying beds. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy and deliberate, even though we were alone. Or so we thought. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, fragments of conversations, or maybe tormented cries lost to time. The hair on my arm stood on end. This place had a presence, an energy that sent shivers down my spine. It felt like we were being watched, judged by the unseen. We pressed on, deeper into the heart of the asylum, our bravado slowly giving way to a creeping unease. We reached a room at the end of a hallway, its door slightly ajar, a pale light emanating from within. As I reached for the handle, a sudden gust of cold air slammed the door shut with a resounding boom. My heart leaped into my throat and I stumbled back, adrenaline coursing through me. I spun around, expecting to find something standing there, but there was nothing. The hallway was empty. I could hear my friends behind me, their breathing shallow and rapid, their faces pale with fear. We were alone, but whatever was in that room with us, it was toying with us. We cautiously opened the door, the room beyond shrouded in shadow. As our eyes adjusted, we made out a desk, a single lamp casting a dim circle of light. On the desk lay a file, open, as if someone had just been reading it. I stepped closer, drawn by an unseen force. My heart pounded in my chest. There, on the file in faded ink, was my name, Suryashankar Dasgupta. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The date on the file was from 50 years ago. We were lost, hopelessly, utterly lost. We had been hiking for hours, deeper and deeper into the woods, our initial excitement at exploring uncharted territory replaced by a growing sense of unease. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, eerie shadows through the dense canopy of trees. Just when our hope was dwindling, we stumbled upon it, a clearing in the woods, and in the center, a sight that stopped us dead in our tracks. It was a mansion, grand and imposing, yet eerily silent. It seemed to materialize out of the twilight, its silhouette stark against the dying light. We had found something, but instead of relief, a cold dread settled in my stomach. This place felt wrong. Curiosity, or perhaps morbid fascination, drew us closer. The front door creaked open as if inviting us in. Inside, the mansion was frozen in time. Dust covered the opulent furniture, cobwebs hung from the chandeliers, and a thick layer of silence hung heavy in the air. We made our way to the dining room, drawn by an unsettling sight, a long mahogany table set for a feast. Silverware gleamed under a layer of dust, china plates held the remnants of a meal long gone cold, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. It was as if the occupants had vanished mid-meal. And then we saw him, a shadowy figure watching us from the top of the grand staircase. Okay, so picture this. It's a Friday night and my friends and I are bored out of our minds. We had exhausted all the usual hangout spots and were looking for something, anything, to break the monotony. We decide to do what any rational teenager would do, sneak into the old abandoned school on the edge of town. It was a place we had all heard about but never dared to explore. You know the one, every town has one. The kind of place that's the subject of countless ghost stories and urban legends. It's been shut down for decades, rumored to be haunted, the whole 9 yards. The kind of place that sends shivers down your spine just thinking about it. Naturally, we thought it would be fun to see if the rumors were true. We were looking for a thrill, something to make our hearts race. As we hopped the fence and crept onto the school grounds, the air grew heavy, like a thick blanket of dread had settled over us. It was as if the very atmosphere was warning us to turn back. The only light came from the moon, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and twisted in the wind. It felt like the shadows themselves were alive, watching us. We found an unlocked window and climbed inside, our hearts pounding in our chests. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating yet terrifying. The air inside was stale and thick with dust, the silence broken only by the creaking of the old building. Every step we took seemed to echo endlessly. We made our way down a hallway, our sneakers echoing on the cracked linoleum floors. The sound was almost deafening in the otherwise silent building. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, like unseen eyes were following our every move. It was an unsettling sensation that made my skin crawl. Then we reached it, a heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway. It looked ancient, as if it had been there for centuries. It was locked tight, with a rusty padlock dangling from the handle. The padlock looked like it hadn't been touched in years. But what sent chills down my spine were the scratch marks. They were deep and jagged, as if something with immense strength had tried to break free. They were deep and fresh, raked across the wood as if someone had been desperately trying to claw their way out. The sight of them made my heart race even faster. My friends, being the brave souls they were, started daring each other to open the door. It was all fun and games to them, a test of courage. They joked about ghosts and ghouls, their laughter echoing hollowly in the silence. But I couldn't laugh. The atmosphere was too tense, too charged with fear. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a primal instinct screaming at me to get away from that door. It was as if every fiber of my being was telling me that something was terribly wrong. Ignoring my gut feeling, my friend grabbed the padlock and gave it a shake. The sound of the rattling padlock echoed ominously in the hallway. It rattled ominously, but held firm. The door seemed to be mocking us, daring us to try harder. Undeterred, he started kicking at the base of the door, each thud vibrating through the air. The sound was almost deafening in the stillness of the building. I wanted to tell him to stop, that it was a bad idea, but the words caught in my throat. Fear had rendered me speechless. Then we heard it, a muffled thump from behind the door. It was a sound that made my blood run cold. It was faint but unmistakable. The kind of sound that you feel in your bones, that makes your hair stand on end. We all froze, our eyes wide with fear. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. The thumping grew louder, more insistent, like someone was pounding on the door from the inside, desperate to get out. And then, a scream. It was high-pitched and filled with terror, cut short as if someone had clamped a hand over the screamer's mouth. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard. I felt a shiver run down my spine, my blood turning to ice. That was it. We had to get out of there. We didn't need another sign. We all knew in that moment that we had stumbled upon something truly terrifying. Whatever was trapped behind that door, it was nothing to mess with. The fear in the air was palpable. My friend who had been kicking the door suddenly looked pale, backing away slowly. The bravado was gone, replaced by sheer terror. Without a word, we turned and ran. The need to escape was overwhelming. We didn't care about being quiet anymore. Our only thought was to get as far away from that room as possible. The fear was driving us forward. We sprinted down the hallway, our footsteps pounding in our ears, the echoes of our fear chasing us. It felt like the building itself was trying to keep us inside. We sprinted down the hallway, our footsteps pounding in our ears, the echoes of our fear chasing us. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping us going. As we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind us, its breath hot on our necks. The sensation was almost unbearable. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see. The fear of the unknown was paralyzing. I just kept running, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for me to stop. But I couldn't stop, not until we were safe. We burst out of the school and into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The relief was immediate, but the fear lingered. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of the streetlights, far from the shadows of the abandoned school. The light felt like a protective barrier. As we stood there, catching our breath, trying to calm our racing hearts, we swore to each other that we would never speak of this night again. It was a silent agreement, born out of mutual fear. We would forget the scratching, the pounding, the blood-curdling scream. We would bury the memory deep within us. We would pretend that none of it ever happened. It was the only way to move on. But some things are impossible to forget. The events of that night were etched into our minds. That night, as I lay in bed, unable to close my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The fear had followed me home. A presence lingered in the shadows of my room, watching me, waiting. It was a feeling I couldn't escape. And then, I heard it. A sound that made my heart stop. A whisper, soft and chilling, carried on the wind. My name. It was unmistakable. It came from the darkness, from the depths of my nightmares. The voice was filled with an icy malice. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. The fear was overwhelming. The whisper came again, closer this time, filled with an icy malice that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if the voice was right next to me. And in that moment, I knew. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Whatever was trapped behind that door, it was free now. And it was coming for me. This abandoned hotel was like a maze. Every corridor whispering tales of forgotten grandeur, each corner hiding secrets of a bygone era. Dust-covered chandeliers hung from cracked ceilings, casting long, eerie shadows that danced in the faint moonlight filtering through boarded-up windows, creating an atmosphere of haunting beauty. We were a group of 4 friends, each step echoing in the silence as we ventured deeper into the heart of the hotel, our laughter echoing off the walls, masking a growing unease that none of us wanted to acknowledge. We stumbled upon a grand ballroom, its once polished floor now hidden beneath a thick layer of dust and decay, the remnants of a forgotten era. It was like stepping back in time, frozen in a moment of forgotten revelry, the echoes of past celebrations still lingering in the air. As we explored further, we noticed something strange, something that sent a chill down our spines. The layout of the hotel seemed to shift, hallways that once led to exits now ending in dead ends, as if the building itself was alive and playing tricks on us. We tried to retrace our steps, but the familiar landmarks had vanished, replaced by an ever-changing labyrinth. A cold dread began to creep up my spine, the silence now pressing in on us like an unwelcome guest, making every sound seem amplified. Our laughter died down, replaced by a tense silence broken only by the sound of our own footsteps. We were officially lost, and the reality of our situation began to sink in. Panic started to set in, our hearts racing as we realized the gravity of our predicament. We needed to call for help, but as I reached for my phone, my blood ran cold, a sense of dread washing over me. The battery, which had been full just moments ago, was now completely drained, leaving us cut off from the outside world. One by one, my friends checked their phones. Each one met with the same inexplicable fate, their screens dark and lifeless. The temperature seemed to drop, a cold draft snaking through the hallways as if an unseen presence was toying with us, sending shivers down our spines. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy that sent shivers down my spine, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. We were trapped, cut off from the outside world in this labyrinth of shadows and dust, our hope dwindling with every passing moment. The weight of our isolation pressed down on us, amplifying every creak and groan of the aging building, making us jump at the slightest sound. We pressed on, our hope dwindling with every passing moment, determined to find a way out of this nightmare. We had to find a way out, no matter what it took. Just when our hope began to dwindle, we stumbled upon a dimly lit hallway, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. At the end, a faint glow emanated from beneath a heavy wooden door, beckoning us forward. With renewed determination, we rushed towards it, our hearts pounding in our chests, the promise of escape driving us forward. Could this be our way out? We dared to hope. We exchanged anxious glances, a mix of hope and fear etched on our faces, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. As we approached the door, the faint glow intensified, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls around us, adding to the eerie atmosphere. With bated breath, I reached for the handle, its cold metal sending a shiver down my spine, the anticipation almost unbearable. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading up into darkness, a new path to explore. It wasn't the exit we hoped for, but it was a way out of this endless maze, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. We didn't hesitate, taking the stairs two at a time until we finally emerged into the cool night air, the sense of relief overwhelming. Relief washed over us as we stumbled out of the hotel, gasping for breath as if we had been holding it for hours, the weight of our ordeal lifting. We had made it out, but the experience had shaken us to our core, leaving us haunted by the memories. We decided to never speak of this again, to try and bury the memory of that night in the deepest recesses of our minds, hoping to forget the terror we had faced. Days later, while going through some old photographs I'd taken of the hotel, I noticed something chilling, something that made my blood run cold. In one picture, a shot of the grand ballroom from the 1920s that I'd found in the hotel, I saw a familiar face in the background, a face that shouldn't have been there. It was me, or at least someone who looked exactly like me, staring back from the crowd, a ghostly doppelganger from another time. My blood ran cold, the memory of that night flooding back, the realization that the hotel held on to something, and it wasn't letting go. The abandoned hotel held on to something, and it wasn't letting go, a haunting reminder of the night we were trapped in its eerie embrace. This abandoned mannequin factory was located on the outskirts of town, shrouded in an unsettling silence. The kind of silence that makes you question if you should even be there. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, a musty odor that clung to the back of my throat. It was as if the building itself was exhaling its last breath. As I stepped inside, the floor creaked ominously beneath my feet, the sound echoing through the vast, empty space. Each creak seemed to amplify the eerie stillness around me. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of anticipation and dread. Every shadow seemed to move, every corner held a secret. And then I saw them, hundreds, maybe thousands of mannequins, their lifeless eyes staring blankly into the darkness. They stood in eerie silence, as if waiting for something. Some were fully assembled, frozen in lifelike poses, while others were scattered in pieces, limbs askew, their painted faces cracked and faded. It was a grotesque display of forgotten artistry. It was like walking into a nightmare, a sea of vacant stares that seemed to follow my every move. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But curiosity pushed me forward. I ventured deeper into the factory, each step echoing in the unsettling silence. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The mannequins were everywhere, their lifeless eyes burning into me. It felt as though they were silently judging my every move. But as I looked closer, my blood ran cold. There was something disturbingly familiar about some of them. Some of the mannequins. They looked familiar, too familiar. Their features, though stiff and artificial, bore a chilling resemblance to people I knew, friends, family, even a few faces from town. It was as if someone had captured their essence in these lifeless forms. One in particular, standing in the shadows at the end of an aisle, sent shivers down my spine. Its presence was almost palpable. Its vacant eyes seemed to hold a flicker of recognition, a knowing glint that sent a wave of unease washing over me. It was as if it knew me. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, a primal fear began to take root. My mind raced with possibilities. I couldn't take my eyes off the mannequin that resembled my neighbor, its eerie familiarity sending chills down my spine. It was as if the mannequin was mocking me. It stood in the dim light filtering through a dusty window, its porcelain skin seemingly glowing. And then it happened. The moment that would haunt me forever. As I watched frozen in place, the mannequin blinked, a slow, deliberate motion that defied all logic. It was just a flicker, a subtle movement that could have been easily dismissed as a trick of the light. But it wasn't. But I knew what I had seen. The mannequin had moved. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Panic began to set in. My breath caught in my throat, every instinct screaming at me to run. I had to get out of there. This was no ordinary factory. It was a place where reality and nightmare blurred. This was a place of nightmares. A place where the inanimate seemed to come to life. Terror lent speed to my feet as I turned to run, my mind reeling from what I had witnessed. I had to escape. The image of the blinking mannequin seared into my mind. It was a sight I would never forget. But as I ran, a whisper cut through the silence, a voice as cold and lifeless as the mannequins themselves. It was a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Now we need one more. The words were chilling, filled with a sinister intent. The words echoed in the vast emptiness of the factory, sending chills down my spine. It was a call, a demand. I didn't dare look back. Fear propelled me forward. I burst through the factory doors and into the sunlight, the fresh air stinging my lungs as I gasped for breath. The contrast between the dark interior and the bright outside was jarring, but the terror lingered, a cold dread that settled deep in my bones. I knew I would never be the same. I knew, with chilling certainty, that the abandoned mannequin factory held a dark secret, and I had just become its latest witness, a secret that would haunt me forever. Some places should never be entered. Some doors should never be opened. And if you ever find yourself in an abandoned building, take my advice. Don't look too long in the dark corners. You might not like what looks back.